Tuesday. Back with me now is former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who was once the third-ranking Republican in the House. I have to ask, what has it been like to watch this fiasco play out over the last few weeks?
I mean, it is, it's hard to describe. I wish that it were surprising. You know, what we've seen is a result of really the leadership decisions that Kevin McCarthy made all the way back after the 2020 election and certainly after January 6th. And, you know, looking the other way in the face of the kind of assault on our democracy that we've seen from Donald Trump and his allies in the House, including Jim Jordan, elevating those members, frankly, some of whom are white supremacists, some of whom are anti-Semitic, a number of whom were involved directly in the attempt to seize power and overturn the election. So it's not a surprise when you see that those people have been empowered, but it's also
McCarthy
really
empowered
dangerous.
them, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You know, in order to be able to obtain the votes he needed to become Speaker. But I also have been, you know, watching the extent to which political violence and the threats of violence have now reared their head once again. You know, those have become part of our politics in a way that certainly they never should. I talked to one of my former colleagues who was in the meeting with Jordan and the holdouts a few days ago, and he told me that when some of the members who were receiving these threats of violence raised it and asked Jordan about it, that another of our colleagues, Representative Davidson, also from Ohio, said essentially, it's not Jim Jordan's fault, it's your fault because you're voting against Jim Jordan. Now that kind of acceptance of violence is completely inappropriate and dangerous in our politics. So we need people who are serious and who recognize and understand the dangers that we're facing globally, as well as from Donald Trump and those who support him.
It used to be that kind of what's called stochastic terrorism, the idea of people demonizing their enemies and not specifically calling for violence against their enemies, but demonizing them in such a way, you know, who will rid me of this meddlesome priest?
Right.
And then people come and threaten them. That was frowned upon, that was discouraged in politics. Do you trace it back to Donald Trump? Like, when did this become an acceptable part of Republican politics?
I think you certainly would have to trace it back, you know, in its modern version to Donald Trump. And we now know, frankly, because of the lie. We know that the lie about the election, we know that telling people that they have to, you know, use violence in order to take back their country, we know that lie was very effective in sparking violence, and it hasn't stopped. I mean, one of the issues that I hope will come up at the Speaker's Forum tomorrow night is the question that Ken Buck keeps asking is, you know, do you understand, do you accept that Donald Trump lost the election in 2020? And do you understand and recognize the connection between continuing that lie and the political violence that we've seen unleashed across the country?
And a bunch of the candidates for Speaker, Kevin Hern, Byron Donalds, Mike Johnson, Jack Bergman, all of them voted to object to the Electoral College results in Arizona and Pennsylvania and to disenfranchise millions of Americans based on those lies. Is that disqualifying?
Certainly. I think there's no question. And I think it tells you, though, you know, over 140 members of the House Republican Conference voted to object and voted to object after the violence.
After people were dead, after bodies were lying dead in the Capitol.
After the mob that Donald Trump provoked had invaded. So it certainly should be a disqualification, and I think that if it isn't a disqualification, it will send a very clear message, yet one more clear message to voters, you know, as they think about who they're going to vote for in 2024, to what extent can you trust this group of Republicans to defend the Constitution, you know, if they're unwilling to even acknowledge the rulings of the courts, as well as you know, the constitutional process that unfolded, and the complete lack of evidence, as well as all of the testimony that we put on in our hearings in the January 6th committee from the leadership of Donald Trump's own campaign, from the leaders of, you know, his White House counsel's office, the Department of Justice, making clear he did not win the election, and he knew he didn't win the election.
I mean, I guess Congressman Tom Emmer, you know, is the majority whip, I believe. He did not vote that way, but I feel like it's almost disqualifying among House Republicans to be reality-based.
Well, that's been my personal experience.
Yeah.
So, and I don't want to, I hesitate to endorse anybody because I think that won't be helpful for them. But I do
listen
think
to what you're
people
saying.
need to-
That's crazy.
Oh,
You are super conservative. You are more conservative than almost any of the House Republican leadership. You're more conservative than the woman who replaced you, Elise Stefanik. You're just not nuts. You're just not anti-democracy.
Right. Well, look, and I think that really is a testament about where we are as a country today. And we have to have a party that gets back to advocating those conservative policies, gets back to embracing the Constitution. That is not what the Republican Party is doing today.
It's just, I mean, do you ever just like stop and think about the world that we're in right now, where a majority of Republican voters and a majority of House Republicans just think the moon is made of green cheese? I mean, it just, I don't even.
No, I do, certainly. And I've spent the last almost a year now working on a book. It's going to be out at the beginning of December that really looks at these issues and tells a story of the evolution inside the Republican conference, for example, as we were walking through this whole period of how did people keep accepting behavior that they never would have accepted before. And it's a cautionary tale because it happened very easily that people said, we're going to go with Trump instead of the Constitution.
What do you think it says about Jim Jordan, and what do you think it says about House Republicans that in his last public ballot, 25 House Republicans voted against him, but then in the secret ballot, a few minutes later, more than 100 Republicans voted against him? A majority.
Right. Look, well, first of all, I'm very glad that they decided. I think that, you know, if it took a secret ballot to send the very clear message that Jim Jordan can't be the Speaker of the House, I'm glad they did that. But I do think that, you know, if we're going to be able to get back to a place in this country where we actually have people who are advocating for the Constitution in both parties, then we're going to need people to, you know, have some more courage than my former colleagues are showing right now, and be willing to say, no, I won't accept this, I won't stand for it, when you have to stand up and say so and put your name next to that vote. Because this notion of the secret ballot being the only time that you can go against Donald Trump helps to strengthen Donald Trump.